All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. A picture, they say, says a million words. It captures moments, encompassing emotions and also revealing the situation. Now, here is one such image. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he's not alone, but however, this photograph freezes one such moment where he appears to be all alone in a crowd. He's seemingly lost in his thoughts. He's pondering on what the future holds for him. He arrived in Vilnius with an audacious demand. Around him are the leaders of Europe and the United States. Zelensky wanted the shield of NATO, something which he hoped would actually ease all of his pain. But the message from the 31-nation bloc was pretty clear. The NATO member states have said that they will continue to arm the Ukrainians. They will provide for all the arms and ammunition, but it is Ukraine's war and Ukraine will have to fight it alone. But as the second day of the summit unfolded in the Lithuanian capital, the Western leaders huddled to provide assurances to Zelensky. They all sang the same tune of a much better, more strengthened cooperation with Ukraine. Listen in.
I'm just chaired the inaugural meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. From now on, NATO and Ukraine will meet in the Council to discuss and decide as equals. This is a significant step to move Ukraine closer to NATO. I also welcome the major new announcements of military support made by NATO allies at this summit. Allies have already provided tens of billions of dollars in military aid to help beat back Russia's invasion.
Today, the members of the G7 are launching a joint declaration of support for Ukraine to make it clear that our support will last long into the future.
The Ukrainian president also overall praised the decisions that were taken here today. And it's also quite clear that this question of NATO membership will not be an issue that is subject to negotiation of those who are not part of this partnership. Russia will not take part in these negotiations, and I think that's very clear.
So as Ukraine remains stuck in a never-ending journey towards a membership in the alliance, Zelensky seems to have no choice but to accept as to what has been offered to him. The warring president's comments at the summit brimmed with understanding.
We are sane people. We understand that our partners are helping us with weapons, and this is a moment of survival, and we need it very much. We understand that some people are really afraid to talk about our membership in NATO right now, because no one wants a world war. And this is also understandable and logical. I want you all to understand that we are civilized and sane people. Ukraine is fighting. At the same time, it understands for sure that Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO while there is a war. And this is absolutely clear.
Now, the message from the West is clear. Ukraine's soldiers and civilians will have to bear the brunt of the war and win on their own. It's been over 500 days of war in Ukraine, and there is a prize on offer at the end of this very costly affair, which may just be a NATO membership. But what price will Ukraine have to pay for its NATO membership is something that still remains to be seen. And to give us more insights in terms of how the NATO nations have been dealing with the Ukrainian demand for a membership in the NATO military alliance, we're being joined in by Tatiana Kukreva, who's a senior journalist. She's joining us live from Moscow. Now, Ms. Kukreva, this is something which the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been lobbying for a very long time. And every single time has been given some loud assurances that the NATO nations stand with Ukraine, but there is no roadmap for Ukraine to become a part of the NATO military alliance.
Well, indeed, you're absolutely correct. And we'll have to, I'd have to bring you back to even before the conflict. There was the same story with the EU membership that actually started this whole situation that we find ourselves in. In 2013, when the then president of Ukraine refused to sign the European integration agreement that would de facto bankrupt the country. And in the meantime, the public took it very harshly, the nationalists that, then began the whole of the madness that Maidan was. and which led then to the coup d'etat. It was the same story. You know, Europe was always talking about kind of accepting Ukraine, but not really. And it's the same story with NATO, what that actually Russia has been talking about for years now, that, you know, we know it. It's in the charter. Ukraine cannot be accepted when it has a war in its territory. And finally, it's actually pleasing to see that the president of Ukraine finally says these words himself, you know, but it just shows you the other side of this conflict.
Right.
And there's a very interesting comment that Rishi Sunak, made today as well, when he was asked about the comment that Ben Wallace made, that Ukraine needs to show gratitude. And Mr. Sunak actually said, you know, that Vladimir Zelensky has shown gratitude for our leadership and support, meaning exactly that. You know, the Western powers are finally admitting that it's their leadership that brought us to this whole situation. Unfortunately, these comments, you know, kind of slide by and don't make it into the public's, into the spotlight, unfortunately.
No, but this of course, is you know, a headline that will be talked about for days to come, where Ben Wallace snubbed Zelensky, saying that the West is not an Amazon delivery service to keep delivering weapons to Ukraine. But the question I want to ask you is this, you know, with the developments that have taken place at the NATO summit in Vilnius, now, Ukraine hasn't got a roadmap for a NATO membership bid, but what it has got is a NATO-Ukraine Council, which will, you know, look forward for the logistics of how Ukraine will be fighting its war from henceforth. What difference do you think this NATO-Ukraine Council will make?
I think it will make absolutely no difference at all. You know, be that as it may, they do have a council now. They didn't have it before, but that didn't stop NATO countries from meddling in this whole situation from the very beginning. You know, again, 2014, we saw the Polish representatives there. We saw Victoria Nuland back in the day, you know, handing out cookies. And I know we keep talking about these images, but that was very clear from the very beginning just how much NATO states, especially the US, is involved in this conflict. And just giving it an official kind of representation does not change the fact that this was an orchestrated affair from the very beginning. And, you know, brings me to the earlier comment that I, told you about. Rishi Sunak saying Ukraine is thankful for our leadership. So Absolutely. Who is, you know, being the leader in this conflict?
Absolutely indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Tatyana Kukreva, for joining us from Moscow and getting us all those insights there.
Good evening to you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.